Back here on the Cover 3 podcast every single Wednesday. We've got picks coming on Thursday in our lock show, but now got to break this down. The Georgia Bulldogs were imperfect in their victory against Florida. The final margin shows a win that was somewhat close to the odds makers' expectations, but the way that they got there, both with early mistakes and also the injury to DJ Lagway, might have some concern for the Bulldogs. Ole Miss, on the other hand, woke up, had their best performance as in conference play. Offensively, again, we highlighting Jackson Dart and all of those yards and all of those touchdowns. So does it continue? Because we arrive in Oxford for a massive game for both of these teams. As we start to break down the matchup itself, Bud, do you think that what Ole Miss found offensively is somewhat repeatable?
Not really.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I went back and I looked at like the most important plays of that Georgia Ole Miss game from last year. And this is a different Ole Miss team. I'll give them that. Mostly on defense. I don't think the offense is better this year. I think it's probably worse in some ways. Now, in that game, and I remember that game well because that was one of my biggest bets of the year, was laying the points with Georgia, because Ole Miss did have a lot of key offensive linemen out. And Georgia just absolutely wrecked them up front. There's some chance they can block Georgia better this year. Obviously, it's better to be playing at home. I know Lane Kiffin feels like they're more equipped this year to hang along the lines of scrimmage, but they're going to need Trey Harris. And, Watkins is not playing Arkansas. He's playing Georgia's corners. And Georgia's corners are maybe not the best they've ever been, but they're better than what Arkansas has by a pretty good margin. So I'm just very much like, they're going to have to show me. And this is probably a game where you need the 11-man run game, because Ole Miss has not rushed the football very well this year with the traditional approach with the backs. Like, I mean, you're going to need Dart to make a lot of running around, scramble plays. I'm not saying they can't win, because Georgia is clearly down from where they've been. But can you guys shake that Texas game? Because I don't know, man. Like, Georgia came out and played at a level that few teams have shown that they can get to this year during that game.
Only thing I would say about that game specifically is maybe Texas isn't as great as we thought either. So, and I thought Georgia looked awesome, and I think you'll get that performance from their defense. But I also thought Texas was slightly overvalued, especially the way their schedule looks now. Michigan win doesn't look as great. We talked about all that going into that game, but they've shown the capability to go on the road and dominate with their defense, which it looks like, that's going to be the game plan again. I just look at this game for, there's no chance, I don't see in any world with Jackson Dart throws for 500.
No.
I don't know if there's a world that he throws for 400. I think they've got to try to run the football just to keep them honest. And I think Jackson Dart's going to have to be that playmaker that when he's getting harassed, kind of what Arch Manning did when Arch went in, except he was deficient as a passer because he's young and he's green. That's where I think you've got to have your best chance at winning that game, as Jackson Dart steps up, makes plays, extends plays with his legs, and is able to, get those critical conversions. And then the great unknown is, what Carson Beck are you going to get? And what sort of confidence would you have that he's able to put that behind him, this season in its entirety behind him?
What concerns me if I'm Ole Miss in this matchup is how Georgia looked in that Texas game. Its defense was elite. The offense was still very sketchy. But the defense was elite because the pass rush was incredible, because in part, Georgia wasn't afraid of Texas's run game. Georgia will not be afraid of Ole Miss's run game in this one either, because if you saw last week, the big plays were there in the passing game, but they haven't been there in the run game all year. And if you look, they hit big plays the last 2 weeks, but even on the season, in non-conference, Ole Miss's explosive rate was 29.4%. In SEC play, it's 13.9. That's a huge drop-off, clearly. Like, they have not been nearly the same offense against SEC teams. And while not elite overall, Georgia's defense is 19th in allowing explosives. So can Ole Miss get anything on the ground to force Georgia to play them two ways instead of just being able to pin their ears back and go like they did against Texas? Because we saw how that worked out for Texas, and I think Texas's offensive line is better than Ole Miss's. So that could be a serious problem for the Rebels. On the other side, that Georgia offense that is sketchy, like when it comes to Carson Beck, how it impacts Georgia right now and how it impacts his draft stock in the spring, there are very concerning numbers and performances when he is pressured. These are some fun stats, all right? Carson Beck, when he is pressured this season, has a passing efficiency of 81.1. For those who don't understand the context, that's bad. This one you'll understand. His completion rate is 36.2% when under pressure. He has averaging 4.9 yards per attempt, and he has an 8.5% interception rate. That is more than that's nearly triple like the national average of what the interception rate is. He is under pressure. He is not completing passes. He is throwing the ball to the other team. He has been awful. Guess which defense ranks 4th nationally in pressure rate this year, guys? Ole Miss. So I have serious questions about how well Georgia. I think this game will look a lot like the Texas game, honestly. I think Georgia's going to have to win it with defense, and they're going to have to overcome some of their offensive problems, especially if the turnovers remain, because that has been a serious problem. So this could come down to whichever defense scores. Like, I don't know if that's like genuinely, but like it's not going to be a 10-7 game and one scoop and score is going to win it, but a 10-7 game where one scoop and score wins it.
Following up on your Ole Miss ground game concerns, leading rusher Henry Parrish Jr. is not on the depth chart, not expected to play this week. So while Ole Miss has been working to get healthier on the offensive line, they are now down. Let's see, how many of these carries? He's got 130 carries on the season, 10 rushing touchdowns, averages 5.22 yards per attempt. The second leading rusher on the team is Jackson Dart. So we're going deep into the running back room in terms of having to ask some players to step up and be a part of that ground game against a Georgia defense that's absolutely tenacious. I 100% agree with you. If I am Glenn Schumann, if I'm putting together the Georgia defensive plan here, it is all about, trying to make sure that we make life very difficult for Jackson Dart. A lot of bodies, a lot of arms, a lot of legs. Make those guys go make physical catches against our blue chip secondary for sure. Do y'all see it as lower scoring too? Because Ole Miss's defensive front is nasty. Like I agree with that. I think Georgia's going to struggle to run the football against this team.
I think it could be lower scoring, especially depending on Georgia's approach. Like, does Georgia get back to trying to run the football with ETN?
But can they? Ole Miss has been awesome against the run.
Yeah, they have.
Any
Georgia did run it good against Texas. That was kind of their saving grace. Was getting
the best run teams Ole Miss has faced.
Oh, let's play the game. All right. Okay.
Right. So they faced South Carolina when Sellers was hurt, and Sanders did not play, or did he play?
I do not remember.
All right, but Sellers was definitely hurt in that ball game. They played LSU, which has not been a good run team so far this year, despite the fact everybody thinks they should be. But they've been awful at it.
Yeah. More later.
They haven't faced A&M yet. Kentucky can't run. Kentucky tried to stick with the run a little bit. Sanders did play, according to the chat. I'm trying to remember now. They haven't played Texas. They haven't played Florida. They haven't played Tennessee.
The top rushing performances against
Green was hurt for Arkansas.
The top rushing performances against this Ole Miss defense have been Arkansas, Oklahoma, and South Carolina. It's been in 3 of the last 4 games. LSU, as you mentioned, was bottled up, but LSU also threw for 337 yards against them. Arkansas got a lot of yards, but a lot of that's garbage time because the game was out of hand so quickly. So, fair point in terms of, among SEC teams, they certainly have not faced the best rushing attacks, but I think that our eyes can tell us that the personnel of that defensive front is still nasty.
Totally.
Okay. Any other thoughts here on Georgia Ole Miss? Anything to keep an eye on?
Typically when Georgia loses, somebody's going to make a special play, right? is Trey Harris right? Because if he's not, I don't think I really trust Watkins to do so. And at that point, you're sort of leaning on how many wide open guys can Ole Miss scheme? Because traditionally, that's what they're going to end up doing against a lot of teams. But against Georgia last year, not so much. Do they have a Ryan Williams type guy? Like if Trey Harris is healthy, he is that guy. But like, is this the game they've been saving him for? Is he going to go? How's he going to look?